Wendell, folk used to call me Bombadil. Tom Bombadil.
Recently introduced into Rings of Power in a manner that fans and critics alike say butchered the character, many non-book fans of The Lord of the Rings are wondering who exactly Tom Bombadil is. Well, you aren't alone, dear fan, because just like the stranger, Frodo too asked this question when Tom saved the Hobbits on their way to Rivendell with the ring from barrow-wights into Old Forest outside of the Shire. The answer? Tom Bombadil is me, and I am Tom Bombadil. Basically, his name is all anyone needs to know about Tom, but lucky for you, we have a little more information. Now that you've subscribed, let us dive right into the history of the merry old fellow with a blue jacket and boots of yellow.
Whether you can become so, we shall soon discover.
Don't you know my name? The history of Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadilio, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon. Hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. This is the rhyme we hear Tom teach Frodo in Fellowship of the Ring before Tom arrives to rescue the hobbits from the barrow-wights. This is after they have dined at his place and shared their quest with him. After he rescued them from Old Man Willow, a man-capturing tree in the Old Forest that bordered Buckland, calming Old Man Willow and scaring barrow-wights, Tom gives his name as his only introduction as he takes the rescued hobbits to his house in Eriador, where Frodo sees the ring has no effect on Tom and that Tom can see Frodo even when he's invisible due to the effects of the One Ring. While we know he's the husband of the river woman's daughter Goldberry, implied to be a nymph, and that his voice has calmed all the creatures he sings to, not much is known of the forest dweller called the Master or the Elder, though he does share something that leads us to believe he is the oldest creature in Arda when he says he was there before the elves and men awoke in Middle-earth, before the trees and before the Dark Lord, Morgoth, came from darkness. Tom is unaffected by the events of the world, remaining always a jovial fellow by the account of Gandalf at the end of the Return of the King, not interested in the War of the Ring except for perhaps the nature aspects such as the Ents. Elrond, too, has met Tom Bombadil as he was known to both elves and dwarves in the first two ages, which we will now look at and try to decipher who exactly this character is. Tom Bombadil in the first and second age of Middle-earth. Tom came to Middle-earth and watched creation happen as he wandered the lands. It is assumed that he was also a witness to the many battles, wars, and events of the First and Second Age, such as the chaining of Melkor or the War of the Silmarillion. It is said that he witnessed the great forests of Middle-earth dwindle, which some say also reduced his powers, implying he was some kind of forest spirit, except that he watched the forests come into being, which implies he is of Valar, or perhaps Eru himself. Wait, what? Let us first share Tom's history, and then we will explain this theory. Like many things, Tom was the first to reside west of the Misty Mountains, making him know intimately the land of the Hobbits would settle in and call the Shire. Tom moved there before the tides were folded, basically before it was made possible for the race of men to reach Valinor. It was even before the elves went west, showing that Tom was part of an almost raw Middle-earth where he met many mysterious figures such as the River Woman's Daughter, the Badger Folk, and the Old Man Willow. While he managed to evade capture from all of them, Goldberry eventually dragged him by his beard to the water. While Tom managed to secure his freedom, the very next day he married the woman, a wedding attended by the Badger Folk and other beings of nature. Okay, so we know Tom's history, and some theorize that his closeness with the Shire and the Hobbits in the Third Age, such as knowing the owner of the Prancing Pony and the Hobbits who gave him the name Bombadil, are apparently what made him jovial. We know he isn't affected by or even cares for the ring, a lack of care we have only come close to in Samwise Gamgee, who many consider the hero of the Lord of the Rings, and we know that while Professor Tolkien called the work a strictly Christian work, he also did not remove the pagan elements from it, showing it was a pre-Christ world where pantheons of gods existed in the culture, and we know that the pantheon the Valar resemble most is the Norse pantheon, with Melkor being a Christian figure, whose arc mirrors the story of Lucifer. Another thing to keep in mind, Tolkien was good friends with another Christian writer, C.S. Lewis, whose work has a figure who was present at the creation of the world, is unaffected by the old magic, and is known to be the Beaver Folk. Yes, we're talking about Aslan. So, is Tom the Aslan of Middle-earth, or is he the voice of Eru, given how powerful his voice is? Or is this powerful creature whose voice and song are so powerful a shade of Eru himself? After all, Ilúvatar sang Middle-earth into being, watched as the Valar shaped it, and would definitely be immune to the works of the Deceiver, or Sauron. Or is the popular theory correct that Tom is one of the blue wizards who became Zen, except that Gandalf would have recognized him, and that the Istari, or the Order of the Wizards, came to Middle-earth after creation and after Melkor was chained and defeated? Or is Tom simply the spirit of the West? After all, Tolkien's works are inspired by the courage of the North as seen in Beowulf. In all of the names given to him, he chose as his identity the names the Hobbits gave him, similar to the Shire. He values home and good cheer and friendship and cares nothing for hoarded gold or power or the events of the wider world beyond nature. More similarities he has with most of the patrol Hobbits, and like the Hobbits, he too sees progress as the cost of nature and yet manages to find a little piece of nature to tuck himself into, if the shoe fits. And before you say it, he cannot be the spirit of Middle-earth, as that was corrupted by the essence of Melkor. To know more, subscribe and watch our video on how Melkor became Morgoth and what will happen to him next. Some fans also look at Narnia and Christian mythos and say that Tom could be Santa Claus because he gives our protagonist the gift of safety and sends him on his merry way. However, fans, there is some inspiration behind Tom that we know of. The character was inspired by a Dutch doll the Tolkien kids had, which had a feathered hat and which John Tolkien seemed to dislike, and yet that is not all. For Tolkien has written a few poems on the character before he appeared in The Lord of the Rings. Why? He was supposed to be the central character in a sequel to The Hobbit until he became a supportive character. The character was supposed to be part of pre-kindly history of Britain. As per Tolkien Gateway, not only this, but the character was meant to be the vanishing spirit of the Oxford countryside. He was also supposed to be a scholarly study of the world from a historical perspective that stands in contrast to the artisanus of the elves. He takes joy in the world and is the fearless study and contemplation of it. Does that make him a Professor Tolkien self-insert? That would be unlikely given the existence of Baron, so we shall move on and talk about scholar Justin Noetzel, who suggests that Tom, who appears to exist in both the seen and the unseen, is associated with the Celtic underworld, and D.E. Gay compared Tom to demigod Wainamoinen from the Kalevala. Both are extremely old and powerful immortal figures who express their powers in rhymes, and both have control over their small, forested country. Despite all this, the professor himself calls Tom an intentional enigma, but others have called him one of the unknown things of the world, such as those who created the tunnels in Moria that even Sauron doesn't know of. The professor simply said Tom does not benefit from interpretation, and that as long as one is focused on the ring, they cannot know the nature of Tom, which some have taken to suggest he is indeed Eru, or perhaps the flame of Eru, especially since his wife says he is. While Professor Tolkien rejected that idea, hinting that unlike Eru, Tom would be destroyed if Middle-earth was corrupted. Another theory is that he is a Rouge Maya, or Vala, or even Aule, and his wife Yavanna, but that is called a radical theory and unsupported by the narrative. Also, the title The Eldest is shared by Tree Beard, the talking tree who is supposed to be a C.S. Lewis insert. So there is that, but Tolkien Gateway argues that if Tom was a Maya sent to test the newly created world and the Dark Lord he is talking about is Sauron, then the theory of a Maya fits him. This is also supported by the works of Robert Frost and the idea that having fulfilled his divine quest. Yet, more theories exist, such as the professor calling Tom the spirit of this earth made aware of itself, and while the idea that he is the spirit of Arda has flaws, one could argue that he might be the spirit of the great music. Which of these theories do you think is the answer to the mystery that is Tom Bombadil? Let us know in the comments while we tell you. How powerful is Tom? We know he is immune to the One Ring, and Gandalf thinks he is careless enough to lose it or throw it away, showing he cares nothing for it. It can also lead one to assume that he isn't powerful enough to contain the ring within his realm, which remains undefined. We know that he does not age and is immortal, being the oldest being in existence. More power to the Eru theory, and his wife called him Master of Wood, Water, and Hill, who is impossible to capture or imprison. Both jovial and sombre, he has a powerful singing voice and commands the natural forces of Middle-earth, and Gandalf implies that unless the very earth has the power to do so, Tom Bombadil would not be able to withstand a siege by the forces of Sauron, suggesting that Tom might be the Gaia figure of Middle-earth, which also makes sense that Tom would be interested in the Ents, but unconcerned with the dealings of mortals, and Norse myths do have a Gaia figure, Jord, which, by the way, is where the name Arda comes from, with that being the Germanic root for earth. So is Tom a creation of Yavanna, the nature goddess of Arda, or is he a spirit of the earth, uncorrupted despite Melkor burrowing his consciousness deep in Middle-earth? Whatever he is powerful, extremely so. And he is ancient, as his name from the Dwaro suggests, but what happens to such power in the Age of Men? Well, we don't know, for Lord of the Rings is supposed to be an alternate history for our world itself. Is he the spirit of the countryside, or a Pan or Frey-like creature who has seen the first raindrop itself and was called the First by Glorfindel, the elf who defeated a Balrog? The fate of Tom Bombadil. Well, we do not know beyond him being jovial, neutral, and unconcerned as always by the accounts of Gandalf. We know Sam wrote about him in the Red Book, but there is no mention of Tom otherwise, unless one makes a far-fetched connection. But there is a Tom and Goldberry outside the Legendarium in a poem called Once Upon a Time, written in 1964. Here we see a much less omnipotent Tom who speaks to all creatures of nature except lintips of night who hide from him. While there is nothing linking them to Arda, and even the name Bombadil isn't mentioned, one could say that in the future Tom's powers could decrease with nature itself and further be lessened as the reshaping of the world draws near. Also, climate change. Just saying. Well, now that we know a lot about the character, let us look at his latest iteration. Yes, in Amazon's Rings of Power. Rings of Power, Tom Bombadil, and why some fans seem to dislike the adaptation of the character, while many fans are simply delighted to see another familiar character, and especially one as talked about as Tom in the series. Some think the show did him dirty. This is not because they turned him into a guide or even a mentor figure alone, but because they took away his enigma and jovial spirit. He is also shown observing desertification and being shocked by it, and like he did with Frodo, he sets the stranger on his path, but Tom doesn't seem as omnipotent in the show. He is cryptic, which isn't the intent of his answers in canon, and he sets Gandalf on his path against the Dark Maya. While he did say that Frodo looked better without the ring, he never took sides in canon, and this iteration of him seems to. This lack of neutrality feels like an added insult to the character. Well, that is not out of character for the show now, is it? While we decide whether we love or hate Rings of Power, because right now it seems to be both, let us present you with a marvelous review. Tom Bombadil is an enigma in a world filled with wonder and magic. He was designed to be such, but as humans, we cannot see a dissonance and not correct it. Tolkien fans are often seen combing through texts to see exactly who Tom can be, yet at the end of the day, all we know for sure about the character is that his boots are yellow, his jacket is blue, and east of the Old Forest, he is a merry old fellow. Oh, and a great singer too. Have we convinced you to subscribe yet? We have more Tolkien content for you, such as Galadriel's family tree or Gandalf's history. We'll see you in the next video, eh?
If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.
Eldest. Mark my words, friend.